There are writers who tell stories. There are philosophers who ask difficult questions. And then there was Fyodor Dostoevsky, a man who did both. He did not write to entertain. He wrote to expose the hidden corners of the human soul. Every page he left behind carries the weight of suffering, hope, guilt, faith, and redemption. His novels were not born in quiet libraries. They were born in prison cells. They were born in debt. They were born after standing only seconds away from death. Few people have looked so deeply into human darkness and still managed to find a reason to believe in light. This is the extraordinary story of Fyodor Dostoevsky, a man who transformed pain into timeless literature, a writer whose ideas continue to challenge millions of readers around the world, and perhaps the greatest psychologist to ever write fiction. Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky was born on November 11, 1821, in Moscow, Russia. The Russia of his childhood was a nation of sharp contrasts. Magnificent palaces stood beside desperate poverty. The Orthodox Church shaped everyday life. The Tsar ruled with absolute authority. Freedom was a dangerous idea. Fyodor grew up inside a family that valued education and discipline. His father, Mikhail Dostoevsky, worked as a military doctor in a hospital for the poor. Every day, the young boy saw people who had almost nothing. He witnessed disease. He witnessed hunger. He witnessed suffering. Long before he became a writer, he became an observer. His mother, Maria, was gentle and deeply religious. She introduced him to the Bible at an early age. Those stories remained with him for the rest of his life. Even when his faith was shaken, he always returned to them. Books became his closest companions. He read history. He read poetry. He read Russian literature. He discovered the great European writers. But above all, he became fascinated by people. Not by their success, not by their achievements, but by their contradictions. Why does a good person commit evil? Why does guilt refuse to disappear? Why does suffering sometimes create compassion and other times create cruelty? These questions quietly followed him throughout childhood. He did not yet know it, but they would eventually become the foundation of every masterpiece he wrote. Life changed suddenly in 1837. His beloved mother died from tuberculosis. Fyodor was only 15 years old. The loss devastated him. For the first time, death entered his life as something deeply personal. Soon afterward, he and his older brother were sent to St. Petersburg. There, they enrolled in the Nikolaev Military Engineering Institute. It was not the life Fyodor wanted. Engineering demanded mathematics. His heart belonged to literature, while other students focused on military studies. He secretly immersed himself in novels. He admired Shakespeare. He admired Victor Hugo. He admired Balzac... Most importantly, he admired Alexander Pushkin, whose influence helped shape modern Russian literature. Although he completed his education, he never felt destined for military service. His imagination refused to obey military discipline. In 1839, another tragedy struck. His father died under mysterious circumstances. Some believed he suffered a stroke. Others whispered a darker story. Rumors spread that he had been murdered by his own serfs. No one knows the complete truth, but the emotional impact on Dostoevsky was enormous. Some historians even believe this event inspired his lifelong fascination with guilt, justice, and the burden of hidden crimes. Whether true or not, his writing would return to these themes again and again. After graduating, Dostoevsky briefly worked as an engineer for the Russian government. The position provided security, but security was never enough. Every evening, he returned home and wrote. He wrote because he had to. Writing was becoming more than a profession. It was becoming a necessity. In 1844, he made a bold decision. He resigned from his government position. Friends considered the choice reckless. His income disappeared overnight. There was no guarantee of success. Yet he believed that a life without literature was a life he could not accept. He devoted himself entirely to writing. It was a gamble, one that would change literary history forever. His first novel, Poor Folk, appeared in 1846. The story focused not on kings or heroes, but on ordinary people struggling with poverty. The novel shocked Russian literary circles. It felt honest. It felt compassionate. It felt painfully real. One influential critic declared that a remarkable new literary talent had arrived. Almost overnight, the young Dostoevsky became famous. He was only 24 years old. The future appeared limitless, but life had something very different waiting for him. The success of Poor Folk brought admiration. It also brought expectations. His later works received mixed reactions. Critics who had celebrated him began to question him. Dostoevsky struggled with disappointment. He searched for new ideas. He surrounded himself with intellectuals. He joined discussion groups where young thinkers debated politics, philosophy, religion, and the future of Russia. They believed ideas could transform society, but in Imperial Russia, ideas themselves could become crimes. And before long, one conversation would change Dostoevsky's life forever. By the late 1840s, Fyodor Dostoevsky had become more than a promising novelist. He had become a restless thinker. Fame had arrived early, but success had not brought peace. He wanted answers to the questions that haunted his generation. Why was Russia trapped between tradition and progress? Could justice exist under absolute power? Could society ever be transformed without first changing the human heart? These were dangerous questions, not because asking questions was illegal, but because the Russian Empire feared where those questions might lead. Dostoevsky began attending meetings organized by a young intellectual named Mikhail Petrashevsky. The gatherings were peaceful. They were not military conspiracies. There were no secret weapons, no plans for revolution. Instead, the participants discussed books. They debated philosophy. They criticized censorship. They spoke about freedom of thought. They imagined a more just society. In many countries, such conversations would have been ordinary. In Russia, they attracted the attention of the Tsar's secret police. The government watched. The government listened. And eventually, the government acted. On the night of April 23, 1849, everything changed. Police officers arrived without warning. Dostoevsky was arrested in his apartment. He was taken away in silence. No explanation, no trial, only uncertainty. He was imprisoned inside the Peter and Paul Fortress in St. Petersburg. Its thick stone walls had held political prisoners for generations. seconds. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. He lived in isolation. He did not know what would happen. He did not know whether he would ever see freedom again. For nearly 8 months, he remained behind bars while investigators questioned him and examined the activities of the Petrashevsky Circle. Eventually, the verdict arrived. The prisoners were declared guilty. Their punishment, death, on the cold morning of December 22nd, 1849. Dostoevsky and the other prisoners were led into a public square. Their hands were tied. They wore simple white execution shirts. A priest offered them a final blessing. The sentence was read aloud. Death by firing squad. 3 prisoners were tied to wooden posts. Soldiers raised their rifles. The command to prepare was given. For Dostoevsky, standing only a few moments away from execution, time seemed to change. Every second became infinitely valuable. Later in life, he would describe those final moments with extraordinary clarity. He noticed the winter sky. He noticed the sunlight reflecting on the church dome. He thought about life, about death, about everything he had failed to appreciate. He believed those were the final minutes of his existence. Then, something unbelievable happened. A messenger rode into the square carrying an official order from Tsar Nicholas I. The execution was stopped. The death sentence had been commuted. Instead of execution, the prisoners would face years of hard labor in Siberia. Historians generally agree that this was no accident. The mock execution had been carefully staged. Its purpose was psychological. The prisoners were meant to experience the certainty of death before being saved. It was punishment through terror. For Dostoevsky, the experience left a permanent mark. He would never forget those few minutes between life and death. They transformed the way he understood existence. From that day forward, every sunrise carried a different meaning. Every ordinary moment became precious. Many of his greatest characters would later confront death with the same terrifying intensity. Soon afterward, Dostoevsky began the long journey east, thousands of kilometers across frozen Russia. His destination was a prison labor camp in Omsk, Siberia. The journey itself lasted for weeks. Winter covered the landscape. The cold was relentless. Freedom disappeared behind him with every passing mile. When he finally arrived, reality proved even harsher than imagination. The prison barracks were overcrowded. The air was heavy. Disease spread easily. The prisoners slept side by side on rough wooden platforms. There was little privacy, little comfort, little hope. Chains were fastened around his legs. They remained there day and night. Hard labor filled his daily routine. He worked alongside murderers, thieves, violent criminals, men whom society had abandoned forever. At first, they viewed the educated writer with suspicion. Many hated the nobility. Many distrusted intellectuals. Dostoevsky himself struggled, yet something unexpected happened. Instead of seeing monsters ... he began seeing human beings. Broken human beings. He discovered that even those who had committed terrible crimes could still laugh, still love, still regret, still dream. That realization changed his understanding of morality forever. He no longer believed people could simply be divided into good and evil. Human nature was far more complicated. Every person carried both darkness and light. Years later, that belief would become one of the defining ideas in novels such as Crime and Punishment, The Idiot, and The Brothers Karamazov. Life in prison was physically exhausting, but perhaps the greatest challenge was spiritual. Books were almost completely forbidden. The one book he was allowed to keep was the New Testament. He read it again and again. Its pages became a source of strength during years of isolation. His relationship with faith deepened, not into blind certainty, but into something more personal, something tested by suffering. He later wrote that true understanding could not come from comfort alone. It had to pass through pain. The prison years also changed his political beliefs. As a young man, he had admired many Western ideas about social reform. In Siberia, those beliefs became more complex. Living among ordinary prisoners, peasants, and soldiers gave him a different perspective on Russia, faith, and the human condition. Whether readers agree with his later conclusions or not, there is little doubt that Siberia transformed both the man and the writer. The ambitious young novelist who entered prison in 1850 was not the same man who would eventually leave. He had lost his freedom. He had lost years of his life. But he had gained something impossible to learn from books alone: a profound understanding of suffering. And that understanding would become the foundation of some of the greatest novels ever written. When his sentence of hard labor finally came to an end, Dostoevsky was not yet free. Another chapter of hardship was about to begin. He would be forced into military service. He would struggle with illness. He would fight to rebuild a life that had been shattered. Yet from those difficult years, a literary giant was about to emerge. After long years of hard labor in Siberia, Fyodor Dostoevsky finally heard the words he had been waiting for. His prison sentence was over, but freedom did not arrive all at once. The Russian government still did not trust him. Instead of returning to St. Petersburg, he was ordered to serve as a soldier in a remote Siberian regiment. It was another reminder that, although he had survived prison, his life was still under the watchful eye of the Empire. The years that followed were quieter than those before his arrest. For the first time in a long while, he was able to breathe without prison walls surrounding him. He slowly rebuilt his life. He made new friends. He continued reading whenever he could. And little by little, he began writing again. But the man who now held the pen was not the same young novelist who had once celebrated literary success. Siberia had changed him. His understanding of human nature had become deeper. His faith had become more personal. His writing became darker, not because he had lost hope, but because he had learned that hope means very little unless it survives suffering. During his military service, Dostoevsky met a young widow named Maria Dmitrievna Iseva. Their relationship was far from simple. Maria was intelligent, emotional, and carried burdens of her own. Despite many difficulties, the two eventually married in 1857. Historians continue to debate whether theirs was a happy marriage. Some letters suggest affection. Others reveal disappointment and emotional distance. Like many parts of Dostoevsky's life, the truth was complicated. His personal life rarely resembled the happy endings found in ordinary novels. In 1859, after years of restrictions, Dostoevsky finally received permission to leave Siberia. He returned to European Russia. For him, it felt like stepping into another world. The cities had changed. Russian society had changed. And so had he. Although he was finally free, rebuilding his literary career proved difficult. Many readers had almost forgotten him. A decade had passed since his early success. A new generation of writers had appeared. He would have to earn his place all over again, together with his older brother, Mikhail. Dostoevsky founded a literary magazine called Vremya, meaning time. The magazine published fiction, essays, and discussions about Russian society. It quickly attracted attention. Once again, Dostoevsky found himself at the center of intellectual life. He was no longer simply telling stories. He was participating in the great debates of his era. What was Russia's future? Should it imitate Western Europe? Or should it follow its own unique path? Dostoevsky argued passionately that understanding the human soul mattered more than copying political systems. For him, no society could truly improve unless individuals confronted their own conscience. Around this time, another challenge became impossible to ignore. Dostoevsky suffered from epilepsy. The condition had likely affected him for years, though its exact origins remain uncertain. Without warning, seizures interrupted his life. They came suddenly, sometimes during conversations, sometimes while traveling, sometimes in the middle of his work. The illness frightened those around him. Yet Dostoevsky spoke about something unusual. He described experiencing brief moments of overwhelming clarity just before certain seizures. Moments in which he felt complete harmony with existence. Moments so powerful that he believed they were worth an entire lifetime. Those experiences later inspired Prince Mishkin, the unforgettable protagonist of The Idiot. Dostoevsky believed that extraordinary psychological experiences, even painful ones, could reveal hidden truths about human existence. His fascination with the mind grew stronger than ever. He no longer wrote simple stories. He explored obsession, isolation, faith, despair, redemption. His characters argued with themselves as much as they argued with others. They doubted, they confessed, they lied, they loved, they hated. Above all, they searched. Readers recognized something astonishing. These fictional characters felt more alive than many real people. Their flaws were painfully believable. Their struggles reflected the hidden conflicts inside every human being. Dostoevsky was not interested in perfect heroes. He believed perfection taught very little. Broken people, those were the people who revealed the deepest truths. Yet even as his creative powers expanded, life refused to become easier. Financial problems followed him constantly. Magazine publishing was expensive. Government censorship remained unpredictable. Income disappeared as quickly as it arrived. The pressure grew heavier every year. Then tragedy struck once again. Authorities banned Vremya after it published a controversial article during a politically sensitive period. The magazine was forced to close. It was a devastating financial blow. Still, Dostoevsky refused to surrender. He and his brother launched another publication called Epic. For a short time, hope returned. But beneath the surface, new storms were already forming. His health remained fragile. Money became increasingly scarce. and fate was preparing some of the most painful losses of his entire life. Those losses would nearly destroy him, yet they would also lead him to create the masterpieces that secured his place among the greatest writers in history. Sometimes, a person's finest work is born only after everything else seems to have fallen apart. For Fyodor Dostoevsky, that moment was approaching. The years that followed became some of the darkest in Fyodor Dostoevsky's life. One tragedy arrived after another, and each one demanded a price. In 1864, his wife, Maria, died after a long illness. Their marriage had been difficult. It had known love, disappointment, misunderstanding, and sacrifice. Yet her death left a silence that could not easily be filled. Before he had time to recover, another devastating blow struck. His older brother, Mikhail, died unexpectedly. For Dostoevsky, this loss was more than personal. His brother had been his closest companion, his business partner, his greatest supporter. Almost overnight, Dostoevsky found himself responsible not only for his own survival, but also for many of his brother's financial obligations. Debt surrounded him. Creditors demanded payment. Publishers wanted manuscripts. Time was running out. Writing was no longer only an artistic passion. It became a fight for survival. The pressure was unbearable. Searching for relief, Dostoevsky turned to something that would haunt him for years: gambling. He discovered roulette during his travels across Europe. At first, it seemed harmless. A single spin, a small victory, the promise that one lucky night could erase every debt. But gambling has a language of its own. It whispers hope, then demands everything in return. Again and again, Dostoevsky won. Again and again, he lost even more. Money disappeared almost as quickly as he earned it. Jewelry was sold. Personal belongings were pawned. Loans multiplied. The brilliant novelist who explored the deepest mysteries of the human mind found himself trapped by one of humanity's oldest addictions. Years later, he transformed those painful experiences into the novel The Gambler. Unlike many writers, Dostoevsky did not imagine addiction from a distance. He lived it. He understood its irresistible hope and its crushing despair. By 1866, his situation had become desperate. A publisher offered him a harsh contract. If Dostoevsky failed to deliver a new novel before the deadline, the publisher would gain the rights to many of his future works. Missing the deadline could destroy his career. He needed help. That help arrived in the form of a young stenographer named Olga Grigorievna Snitkina. She was only 20 years old. Calm, intelligent, disciplined. Every day, Dostoevsky dictated while Olga wrote at remarkable speed. Together, they raced against time. The result was The Gambler, completed just before the deadline expired. His career had been saved, but something even more important had begun. As they worked side by side, mutual respect slowly became affection. Affection became love. In 1867, Fyodor Dostoevsky married Anna. It would become the happiest and most stable relationship of his life. Anna believed in him when many others had lost hope. She managed family finances. She negotiated with publishers. She protected him from creditors whenever possible. Most importantly, she gave him the stability he had rarely known. For perhaps the first time in his life, Dostoevsky was no longer fighting alone. During these difficult years, another extraordinary work was taking shape, Crime and Punishment, published in 1866. It tells the story of Rodion Raskolnikov, a poor former student who convinces himself that murdering a cruel pawnbroker might be morally justified. The novel quickly becomes something far greater than a crime story. It asks terrifying questions. Can intelligence excuse evil? Can morality be rewritten? Can guilt ever truly remain hidden? Readers followed not only the investigation of a murder, but the collapse of a human conscience. Raskolnikov discovers that escaping the law may be possible. Escaping himself is not. The novel became an international masterpiece. Its psychological depth astonished readers. Many critics later argued that Dostoevsky had explored the unconscious mind decades before modern psychology emerged. Even Sigmund Freud admired his extraordinary understanding of human behavior. Success finally returned, but Dostoevsky refused to repeat himself. In 1868, he published The Idiot. Its central character, Prince Mishkin, is kind, compassionate, and deeply honest. Instead of asking what evil looks like, Dostoevsky asked something entirely different. What would happen if a truly good person entered a broken world? Could innocence survive among ambition, pride, greed, and deception? Or would society destroy goodness itself? The novel offered no easy answers. It challenged readers to reconsider their assumptions about strength and weakness. For Dostoevsky, true courage often looked gentle rather than powerful. As his reputation grew across Europe, so did the ambition of his ideas. He no longer wrote simply about individual lives. He wrote about civilization, about faith, about freedom, about the dangerous belief that human beings could create heaven on earth while ignoring the human soul. His novels became philosophical conversations disguised as stories. Every character represented a different vision of life. Every dialogue became a battle between competing ideas. Readers were not told what to believe. They were invited to think. And perhaps that is why his books continue to challenge readers. More than a century later, they do not offer comfort. They demand honesty. Yet Dostoevsky's greatest achievement still lay ahead. The novel that many scholars consider his masterpiece had not yet been written. It would bring together everything he had learned. Every joy, every loss, every doubt, every hope. And it would become one of the greatest works in the history of literature. By the early 1870s, Fyodor Dostoevsky had endured almost every hardship life could offer. He had stood before a firing squad, believing he had only moments left to live. He had survived years of hard labor in Siberia. He had known poverty, illness, grief, addiction, and crushing debt. Many people would have been broken by such a life. Dostoevsky was transformed by it. The suffering that had once threatened to destroy him had become the source of his greatest strength as a writer. His novels were now read across Russia and beyond. Readers no longer saw him simply as a storyteller. They saw him as a thinker, a man who understood the deepest conflicts of the human heart. In 1872, he published Demons, also known as The Possessed or The Devils, depending on the translation. The novel explored the rise of political extremism and revolutionary violence. Rather than attacking specific individuals, Dostoevsky examined the dangerous consequences of ideas that rejected morality altogether. He believed that when people convinced themselves that everything was permitted, destruction would eventually follow. The novel was controversial. Some praised it, others criticized it, but few could ignore it. Dostoevsky had once again forced his readers to confront uncomfortable questions. As the years passed, his reputation continued to grow. He gave public speeches. He wrote essays. He became one of the most respected literary voices in Russia. One of the defining moments of his later life came in 1880, when he delivered a speech honoring the great Russian poet Alexander Pushkin. Thousands gathered to hear him. The speech was more than a tribute to a poet. It was a reflection on the future of humanity. Dostoevsky spoke about compassion, about forgiveness, about the possibility that understanding one another might accomplish more than hatred ever could. Many in the audience were deeply moved. Some wept openly. It was one of the greatest public triumphs of his life. Yet while the world celebrated him, Dostoevsky remained focused on the work that mattered most. He had spent years thinking about a single novel, a novel that would bring together everything he had learned through suffering, everything he believed about freedom, faith, justice, love, and responsibility. In 1880, he published The Brothers Karamazov. For many readers and scholars, it remains his greatest masterpiece. The novel tells the story of a fractured family, a selfish father, 3 very different sons, and a crime that forces each of them to confront the meaning of truth and guilt. But beneath its dramatic story lies something much deeper. The novel asks questions that have challenged humanity for centuries. Can there be morality without faith? What does freedom truly mean? Why do innocent people suffer? Can forgiveness heal even the deepest wounds? Dostoevsky never offered simple answers. Instead, he trusted his readers to wrestle with those questions themselves. Perhaps that is why the novel still feels remarkably modern. Its characters are not symbols. They are living, breathing human beings. They argue, they doubt, they hope, they fail, and through them, readers often discover something about themselves. By this stage of his life, Dostoevsky had become far more than a novelist. He had become one of the world's greatest explorers of the human mind. Long before psychology became an established science, he understood that people are rarely divided into heroes and villains. Most of us carry both light and darkness within us. Our greatest battles are often invisible. They take place inside our own conscience. On January 28, 1881, according to the modern calendar, Fyodor Dostoevsky died in St. Petersburg at the age of 59. The cause of death was complications related to a pulmonary hemorrhage. News of his death spread quickly across Russia. Thousands of people came to pay their respects. Writers, students, workers, soldiers, ordinary citizens. They gathered not only to mourn a famous author, they came to honor a man who had given voice to their fears, their hopes, and their deepest questions. His funeral became one of the largest literary funerals Russia had ever witnessed. Yet death did not silence Dostoevsky. If anything, it amplified his voice. Over the decades that followed, His influence reached every corner of the world. His novels inspired philosophers, psychologists, theologians, and writers alike. Thinkers such as Friedrich Nietzsche admired the power of his ideas. Sigmund Freud regarded him as one of the greatest observers of the human mind. Albert Einstein called The Brothers Karamazov one of the most profound books he had ever read. Generations continued to discover his work, and every generation found something different within its pages. That is the mark of timeless literature. Dostoevsky once experienced the certainty of death. He believed his life had ended before it truly had. Perhaps that experience taught him something few people ever fully understand. That every moment matters. That every choice carries weight. That every human soul is infinitely more complicated than it first appears. His novels remind us that suffering can destroy us, but it can also deepen us. That guilt can imprison us, but truth can set us free. That faith and doubt are often closer than we imagine, and that hope is most meaningful when it survives despair. Fyodor Dostoevsky did not leave behind a system of philosophy. He left something far more enduring. He left questions. Questions that continue to challenge readers more than a century after his death. Questions about freedom, about conscience, about love, about evil, about redemption, and perhaps that is why his books have never truly grown old. Because the world changes, technology changes, empires rise and fall. But the human soul remains a mystery, and few people have explored that mystery with greater honesty than Fyodor Dostoevsky. He died in 1881, but the conversation he began has never truly ended.